Would all of you do me a favor right now and just take a deep breath in and exhale? Christmas is a complicated holiday. I mean, there's just like all the stuff around Christmas. It's a happy time for some people, and then they turn like 6 and life starts kicking them in the teeth. And then Christmas can just be a hard time sometimes. And then there's like the actual logistics around Jesus was born in the spring, and the Magi and the shepherds were not in the same room at the same time. And what are we celebrating, and what's the origins of Christmas? And there's even some tension there. And then your transition pastor needs a well-deserved break. And so he says, hey, would you conduct a Christmas service? And it's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll give it a try. And the wick doesn't last long enough to light the candles on the wreath, and a microphone cuts out every once in a while. Like, Christmas is complicated. But can we just relax? Can we just take one more breath? Just inhale, exhale. Isn't that cute? The other thing about Christmas is it kind of became like a kid's holiday, didn't it? It's really more about the kids, it seems, a lot of the time. And so our shepherds are really, really cute, and our sheep are super cute, and I'm pretty sure they were cute anyway. The angels all are just these cute little cherubic faces, and that's kind of the idea we have of Christmas in a lot of our little manger scenes. And it's cool. This year I've heard a lot of messages out there pointing out that the first people that got invited to see what was going on were shepherds. And shepherds were outcasts, and we get that. But we still kind of have this kid's picture in our head, and so we think, oh, there's these gentle guys that are caring for these cute little fuzzy animals, and we also live in a society that has started to equate victimhood with virtue. I don't know if you knew that, but if we see a group that is victimized, we kind of just decide that just on the basis of that alone, they're virtuous. So there's just some messages in there that maybe aren't super accurate. If I had $1 billion, one of the things that I would do is make a movie about the first Christmas, or when Jesus was born. It'd be called The Incarnation. Rated R. I want to start with the title, and then we'll get to the rating a little bit later, all right? But let's start with the incarnation. What does incarnation mean? You know what carne is? Carne asada, or it's meat, right? And what we read earlier today, what Terry read, was out of the book of John. It said the Word became flesh. You know what flesh is? It's meat, right? There are some profound theological lessons to be learned from the fact that flesh means meat, but we're not going to talk about that. That's another time. But the Word, and here we're talking about Jesus as like the eternal creator of everything. The Word became meat, and He made His dwelling among us. He was in the world, and though the world was made through Him, we kind of talked about that yesterday if you were here. Though the world was made through Him, the world did not recognize Him. He came to that which was His own, but His own did not receive Him. Why? Why didn't they receive Him? Well, we read what they were expecting. Andrew read this to us. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. It sounds like I might even need to speak loudly because this microphone might be cutting out. It's okay. His own received him not, because they kind of picked and chose the Bible that they were reading. They got these prophecies and they knew the Messiah was coming. They'd known since Moses. Moses had prophesied about a Messiah that was coming, a great prophet. And they'd been looking forward to him, but they kind of picked and chose the prophecies about the Messiah that they were going to listen to. And they really zeroed in on stuff like this. And so, a few hundred years after this was recorded, the Romans were dominating the world around them. Absolutely dominant. They were the United States of the time. No one was going to come against the Romans. And the Israelites didn't really like that, being ruled by this dominant force. And there had been attempted insurgencies against the Romans, as there had been against the Greeks and the Persians and the Babylonians. But this is what they were holding on to right here. As they look forward to Messiah, they were thinking, we're going to have somebody born even in Bethlehem. They even knew that. And he's going to rise up, and he's going to become a political figure who's going to lead our armies and take out the Romans. So when Jesus comes along, remember Palm Sunday, they even welcome him into Jerusalem because they're like, okay, this guy, God is with him. He is going to lead us. And so on the Sunday that he enters Jerusalem, they're shouting, "Save now, save us." And they're giving praise to God, and they're throwing their cloaks down on the ground so his donkey can walk on their clothes and on their palm branches that they're throwing down. They give him this triumphal entry. And 4 or 5 days later, instead of shouting, "Save us," what are they shouting? Crucify him. They did not receive him because even in that short time, he made clear he's not going to establish a political kingdom right then and there. That's coming later. Since they wouldn't receive him, though, God said, "I know. Let's go talk to these shepherds." How many of you have ever worked in an all-male or almost all-male work environment? Okay. I want you to think about the average day in an all-male or almost all-male environment. And you tell me on a scale of 0 to 10 how virtuous that day's work experience is. You have these guys out in the fields outside of town, and they are outcasts. But just because they're outcasts does not mean that they are virtuous men. These are rough guys. And the reason why the incarnation, if I ever have $1 billion and I make the movie, the reason it's going to be rated R is because the things that come out of their mouth will be horrible. There will be cussing and swearing, I'm sorry, because that's who these guys were. There will be mentions of so-and-so's mother and such a time. Okay, so suggestive dialogue and coarse language, rated R. They're not bad dudes, but they are not paragons of virtue here. And so they're just hanging out, and they're probably joking about somebody's mom right at the moment that all of a sudden the angel appears. And this angel is not a cute little chubby-faced cherub. Because what's the first thing that angel has to say? What's the first thing every angel has to say when he encounters a human being? Don't be afraid. I know I look terrifying. I know I probably could kill you if I just gave you a mean enough look. But don't be afraid, because I'm here with good news. And so this angel shows up, and he says, hey, shepherds, you foul-mouthed group of men, I have something you're going to want to see. Did you know tonight the Savior has been born? We want you to come and see him. And the shepherds, after being overwhelmed by like a host, hundreds or thousands of angels singing a song, I don't know how that one works in the movie, because Hans Zimmer can take his best crack at really nice music there. But we're talking about like the choir master from heaven with these thousands of angels who probably have perfect pitch, just overpowering these guys with glory to God in the highest and peace on earth to those with whom God's favor rests. And then they say, go, you're going to find a baby in a feeding trough. And if our appearance wasn't enough for you to know that this is from God, when you see a baby laying in a feeding trough, then you will know that this is from God. So the shepherds go, they go into Bethlehem, they find it just like the angels said, and they bow down and they worship. And then they go and they tell everybody they can. These were the people that Jesus chose for the very first night that he spent on this planet. And then he goes 30 years later and he starts teaching and he calls his disciples. And who does he call? He calls fishermen. Anybody ever been fishing with a group of men? It's probably really similar to a group of men out in the fields all day long with nothing to do but watch a bunch of stupid sheep running around, okay? The mouths get going. And yet these are the men that Jesus called to establish the church on earth. There's like over 1 billion people, over 2 billion people who profess to be Christians today, and it started with a bunch of foul-mouthed guys out on their boats. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, Levi, he was one of the disciples. He wasn't a fisherman. He was a tax collector, and tax collectors were cheaters. They would steal your money. Not good guys. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law who were Pharisees saw him eating with the sinners and the tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Let's be perfectly frank with each other. Sometimes Christmas Eve and Easter are the only two moments that some people step foot in church. And if there is a sense of unworthiness because you know the rest of the year, what comes out of your mouth, the thoughts that go through your mind, the way that you're behaving out there, you just know you're not righteous and so you don't belong in a church, that's wrong. Some of us have grown up in church, I know I did, and I thought I was righteous because I did it. And it took the first 26 years of my life to realize we're all sinners. I certainly was. And I finally had to come to a place where I'm crying out to God to save me from myself. If you, tonight, whether you grew up in the church and you're still here, or you grew up in the church and then walked away and now it's like twice a year for you, or this is the first time you've ever stepped foot in a church building, there's only one type of person that will receive the word that became flesh, and that's a sinner that knows he or she is a sinner. Part one there, if you don't know that you're a sinner, you are. We're all sinners. So we're all eligible on that count. But it's that second part. Do you know that you're a sinner? Some of us that have been in church our entire lives, we actually don't know that yet. That's really, really sad, and that's really, really scary. And so my prayer would be that we would come to discover that so that we can actually receive the actual Word that became flesh. But if you are a sinner and you know that you are a sinner, guess what? This is who Jesus came for. It is the sick that need a doctor, and that's why Jesus came. So that's the open invitation tonight. Receive him. For as many as receive him, those are the people that get the right to be called the children of God. I'm just going to make a little plug. Next Sunday, we're going to establish from the Bible, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God is not angry with you. Okay? It's the most surprising truth in the universe. God is not mad at you. So if you want to see that established from the scriptures, beyond a shadow of a doubt, let's talk about it next week. This is not going to be some universalist, all roads lead to heaven thing, okay? Don't worry about that, okay? We're not universalists, but God is not mad at you.